it's a learning curve, and it definitely, I think, is being an artist maybe helps your character in some ways, because you have to learn to how to deal with those things as well. You definitely have to find a way to, I don't know, get a bit of a thicker skin, I suppose.
Welcome to the Flying Fruit Bowl, a platform dedicated to the discussion and exploration of art and the creative process. I'm your host and the creator of the Flying Fruit Bowl, Aaron S., and today's episode is the second part of our conversation with Ellis King. If you haven't had part one yet, please listen to last week's episode, as this part is a direct continuation of the conversation. Thank you very much. Ellis's paintings sit in an interesting space between the real and the abstract, which considers the notions of beauty and the male gaze within the wider discourse of what it means to be a woman. So, do you think there are any of the themes that you can't explore through art?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, because I mean, there's the classic, what is it, a picture tells a story of 1,000 words, and I think that the only issue with that is if there are themes of your work that you capture that don't translate. But in a way, does that matter? Because you're creating something with a theme in mind, or whatever it is that you're exploring at the moment, and that is your interpretation of it. So whether or not it translates or not is hearsay, I suppose. And also, I think that with painting, there are so many different ways that you can do things. You can focus very specifically on something, or you could create a scene. And even in that scene, you're able to communicate things that perhaps you're not in other ways. So just the medium and the form itself, I think, has so many different avenues for you to be able to explore that I almost feel like it's quite limitless in how you can translate those different themes into the work.
Okay, so let's actually get into your creative process. Let's talk about that. So what is your creative process like? And do you have any kind of like routines that help you focus on art?
So yeah, I definitely have a process. So as I mentioned before, I try and treat any of my work time like work. So I've got like a home studio that's based in, we kind of converted our garage into a room, and I paint in there. So I'll head in there, and like generally I've already got an idea of what it is that I want to paint, or an idea of how I might want it to look when I start. And I tend to listen to podcasts for the entire time that I paint. I used to paint to music, and then I found it almost a distraction at times, whereas I feel like I don't know, there's something about podcasts, I think it's probably just people talking, that is quite soothing for me and just allows me to really get stuck into what I'm doing. And yeah, like one painting I could paint a painting in 4 hours or a day. It kind of totally depends on how I feel when I enter into that space, as to whether or not I feel like I want to produce something and I need to, I want to see something quickly, and that's the mood that I'm in at that time, or that I've got an idea of something that could take, 4, 5, 6 days. It kind of really, really depends. And I think as well that it varies dependent on the different series or categories of work perhaps that I enter into as well.
So when I spoke to Mike Thompson, one of the things that we spoke about in terms of creating in a studio is the idea of loneliness and creating in isolation. Like, as an artist who has a studio, no matter where it is, but it's a studio, like, how do you deal with the idea of kind of working in isolation?
It has its pros and cons, I think. So my ambition at some point would be to be in a studio, like in a creative space where there are lots of other artists working, and you kind of have your own room that you can crack on in. Whereas I think at home it's very, very solitary. And the one benefit of that is that because I've got a young son, a lot of time outside of that is very busy and very hectic and very nonstop and lots of talking. And so to escape into the studio at home when that life isn't happening, and to kind of get stuck into the work and have it completely my space, is really refreshing and a bit of a recharge for me. But equally, it does have its drawbacks where you don't have that sense of community, I think, that maybe other artists have when they're working in other spaces, or they have residencies and things like that. So I think there's pros and cons to it, and maybe that will, hopefully at some point I'll get to experience something else, but at the moment that's kind of all I know in terms of producing work.
See, that's actually really interesting. And what I'm going to send you is I'm going to send you a few artists whose work doesn't align with yours, but they're artists I've spoken to who have families. And I think it'd be really interesting to have this conversation about how you have a family and be an artist, and kind of like how you balance the two. Because I think if there's one thing that isn't really discussed amongst older artists, for instance, is how you balance that, because you have to obviously you've got to spend time with your family. So I have them, but art is a dedication. And it's like how do you personally manage to balance the two?
I think that kind of goes into also like a lot of the themes of my work around why, the difficulties that I think there is being women and being a creative in that space, or I guess whatever profession you're in, actually, it feels like women have to make quite a lot of decisions around whether or not they're going to be stay-at-home mums or in full-time employment, and then what conversations or criticisms that opens up for them. There seems to be like a very, I would say, clear narrative around what it should be for a woman in work, and there continues to be a lot, or there's at least more conversations, I think, around how we take on way more of like the family life than the majority of men in terms of how that work-life balance works. And I think they're really good conversations to have. And I think then part of that kind of comes into my work, where I think more around just the process that I have, and how, like I said to you this week, I've not been able to do any painting other than the half day on Monday that my son was in nursery. And that is a very short amount of time that I have to then immerse myself into it. And it's almost like it can be a bit disorientating sometimes, like being so engrossed in something and then having to completely remove yourself from it, which I think is also part of why I said to you, I could go in and be like, right, I'm going to create a painting in this one time, and whatever comes at the end of it, that is the painting. Versus if I have more time to explore something,
yes,
but it's very stop start. It's not. I don't have this Monday to Friday. Okay, I get in the studio, I paint, I finish at the end of the day, I get in the studio. I don't have that. So I think as an artist, it can be quite. It can really limit your creative process or your creative flow at times, and it can be really, really frustrating. But I think it goes also back to the conversations that we've had before about being a creative, especially in the early stages of your career. You're not really earning money, so you can't really contribute that much to. I couldn't say put my son into nursery an extra 2 days a week and just do it because it's financial. So you're constantly having to make these sacrifices or trying to find these balances.
See, that's really interesting. And I'm kind of really actually curious now you said that. It's like, do you think that because your time is not limited, that the time you are painting, you value more?
Yes, definitely. I think that one of the benefits of it is that I could create a portrait in 3.5, 4 hours now, where I wouldn't have been able to before, because I know I have that time. And so your creative process has allowed you to know exactly what you need to do in order to create that thing that you feel like you need to make to feel fulfilled in some sense. So I think it gives you parameters, which sometimes that structure can be really, really helpful, I think. And equally then you really berate yourself if I have a whole day in there of my 3 days a week. If I have a whole day and at the end of it, I think, oh my God, that's terrible. What have I done? That's awful. Like, oh. And you've spent a whole day on it. And then, so it's a real conflicting thing, I think, with time and time management and all of that side of things that I have to consider, or probably other working artists who are parents also have to consider.
See, but to me, that kind of makes me feel very reassured, because it makes me think actually doing things part-time isn't actually as bad as people make it out to be, because there's kind of a stigma that, oh, you're a part-time artist, or oh, you're a part-time creator or whatever. But actually it's the fact that having that less time to do things makes you more focused on what you're doing. And that might be why, as we said earlier, like when you have the time to do stuff, you get on with doing it, which is probably why you work so hard when you're doing art, because you don't have the time to mill about. You don't have the time to waste on, trying to get X and Y perfect. You want to create something because you're in that, that mode and that mindset to get things done. You're going to get it done. Like I said, that actually really made me think about that, actually. Thank you so much. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's this weird, like, perfectly imperfect space, isn't it? Where you do just need to, at times the fulfillment is just getting something done and feeling like something is done. And no artwork is, it might be perfect to certain artists, but I'll look at pieces that I did 6 months ago and think, God, there's so many things I changed in that now. But at that point that I created it, to me, it was done, and it fulfilled what I needed it to fulfill. And also I think you, as a part-time, I guess one of the drawbacks is that you can't produce things at the speed. I don't have 5 days, 6 days to do my work in. So I'm not producing things at the same rate that other people might be able to, which means, as we all know, can be a massive drawback. And you do have to find time to, how I categorize my time at home. My son might go to bed and then I'll go into the studio and do 2 hours of an evening. But I think that I'm also doing that because I really enjoy doing it. So
yeah, I can say that I commend you on that, because it's dedication. It's not just I'm just bored, let me just paint. It's like, oh no, I really feel the need to do this. So I highly commend you for that, because it must not be easy. It really must not be.
Yeah, so I think it's the same as anyone. They're like, we're all tired, we're all doing too much, we're all
tired. That is the story of my life. I don't think I've been awake since I was 18. So it's as I say to everybody, like I said, my advice for anybody in life is enjoy your life before 18, because as soon as you hit 18, you will never feel like again. Trust me, you'll feel constantly tired, because you'll never get enough sleep, and you'll never get enough sleep, you'll never do enough during the day, and you just won't be satisfied with anything. So it all goes downhill from 18. It's all good.
It's the pressure we all put on ourselves as well, though. I think
it is.
And back to what we were saying about the comparison and the pressure.
It's actually insane when you think about it. Like, just think about how much damage we're doing to ourselves for honestly no reason. It's actually pretty crazy. And I need to not think about that, because I'll probably cry. So in terms of your work, how much pre-production do you do? And kind of like how much planning goes into it beforehand, as opposed to actually on the like when you're painting on the board with the canvas?
Not much work goes into the pre-production. I've started thinking way more around what it is that, like thinking about series and what the style that I want the series to have, and maybe more about what the message is. And I've got some ideas about what I'm kind of doing next. So I'll think more about those ideas. But then when it comes to the actual piece itself, I kind of just live in it and just see where it goes. I'm not very... I don't have an idea of exactly how I want it to turn out, and I don't have parameters set up for myself, I think, in that space. I've got an idea, and then I just let myself see where it turns out.
That's really cool. That's probably the best way to work, because you're not limiting yourself. I'll just go back to a second for what he said about finishing artwork. I did an interview with the incredible artist Jay Riggio, and one of the things he said in that interview that I always remember is that art is never finished; it's abandoned, because you always leave it in a certain state, and you should never go back to it. So
yeah, that's so true.
It's something that's always stuck with me, and every time I get a chance to, I say that in an interview. That's perfect.
It's really great.
Let's get into social media. Before we do, a couple of questions about exhibiting work. So you have exhibited your work so far, obviously probably more minimally, I imagine. But how have you found the process of exhibiting so far?
I found it really positive, just in terms of feeling like you're moving forward. I think the whole idea about exhibiting work is kind of what you always aim for when you first start, to try and get your work seen by more people, or be alongside other artists. So I found it positive. I think the only negative I think about it is that I do feel like there's a bit of a, how do I say this? It's hard sometimes to know if, when you decide to do an exhibit when you're starting out, that you're being selected for the right reasons. And that obviously links back to how you value yourself and your own self-worth and whether or not you feel like you're worthy of it. But I think there are a lot of artists out there trying to make it, and I worry sometimes that we can be taken for a little bit of a ride with certain spaces, and pay this and you'll get exhibited, and it's a really difficult one to navigate.
That is exactly why I don't charge people to be featured, because I don't believe in that. It's not about, pay me enough feature your work. It's the fact that like you're creating work, you want it to be seen, then okay, let's show it. I think I know a lot of artists who had bad experiences with paying up money for exhibitions, or what they think they're paying for is not what they're getting. And I think particularly when you're starting out, because you want any and every opportunity, you really can be taken advantage of. So I would definitely advise you to be very careful and very selective and do your research about what you're exhibiting. And actually, there is actually an opportunity that I sent to, ironically, Pippa and Felicity the day. That is an exhibition specifically for female artists that I will send to you.
That would be great.
Because that's definitely down your street. I saw it and I was like, oh. So the thing is, I see opportunities because the way my life is,
you're in that world.
Yeah, it just happens. Like literally half of them are just Instagram ads, and I'm like, okay, this is cool. It works out well. And as soon as I see them, I think, okay, who do I know is going to benefit from this? So then I send it to them, which is perfect.
That's amazing.
So that's the way I think.
Seeing these things, isn't it? So
that's the thing, because I'm well aware that as an artist, you're not going to spend 5 hours researching galleries.
I think there are loads. I think there's loads of opportunities. It is just
finding them,
being selected.
Yeah,
that's the thing. You're up against tons of great
artists.
Exactly. Yeah. It's about staying positive and not letting for every one acceptance you have, I don't know, 10 failures, and that's fine. Like, it is just part of it. But I think that is also what makes it really difficult when you get one accepted and you think, oh, this is great, and maybe they're not exactly the best spaces for you to be in. But I wonder if that's just part of the learning curve. And the hard thing is that, as you know, like, you have to start building a portfolio, and it's kind of the space that I'm in at the moment, where I'm trying to get exhibits on my CV or my work portfolio, because that is the way that you look more established and that it feels like people start to take you seriously. But it definitely comes sometimes with a bit of a cost.
I think I would always recommend, not that I have any particular experience exhibiting work, but I would always recommend you check out the place you're going to exhibit your work, because at the end of the day, the environment in which your work is exhibited is going to be equally, if not in some cases, just as important as the work itself.
Yeah, totally.
Because at the end of the day, if you're going to exhibit and it's literally in some random shack in the middle of like London that nobody ever goes to, yeah, it might be cheap, but it's not going to do you any good. Similarly, if it's in like a swanky hotel in the middle of London that's like crazy expensive and it's cost you a fortune to exhibit it, that also may not be, helpful to you, because the clientele might have the money, doesn't mean they're going to spend it. And from my personal experience of people, like, the more money you earn, the more money you want to keep for yourself. So it's kind of a bit like, just because you think someone's going to have money and they're going to pay big bucks because they've got it, they're probably not. They've probably got a car they want to buy instead. They've probably got a watch they want to buy instead. They've probably got a house they want to buy instead. And who can blame them? Totally. So, I think we have to also remember that art is a luxury. And you have to create the demand for your work. Like, as an artist, it's your responsibility to create the demand for your own work, because you're not the only one creating art. You have to remember that. This is advice I gave somebody yesterday. Like, that's why it sounds so good. Like, you have to remember that you're not the only artist in the world. And like, you have to remember, you have to figure out, like, what's going to separate you? What's going to make people look at your work and be like, oh, I want to own an Ellis King piece of work on my wall. You have to think about it like that. Like, creating work and sharing work and posting work is great, and it's fun. Everybody does it. We all do it. But that's not what being an artist is just all about. You have to have depth. I think, personally, that's just my opinion, though. So
no, completely agree.
So talking about that, like, are there any particular artists you like to collaborate with and or exhibit with?
Oh God, like, there are so many. But I think that the thing is, like, the artists that are really inspirational to me they're such pipe dreams. Like, they're people I look at and I think, God. So I don't know that I'd necessarily want to collaborate or exhibit with them. I'm just in awe of what they do. One very, very well-known artist, Jenny Savile.
Yes.
She produces some amazing, and her work it's so inspirational to me. And I love just when I look at her pieces, what that draws out in me and the emotions that pulls out in me. So I find her super inspiring. And there's also a local artist in Norwich called Will Tether. And he's got some fantastic work as well. And like, very, like, the concepts of it, I find really, really intriguing, and just how he plays with his composition and the color choices and things, I find really fascinating. So yeah, I don't necessarily look at artists' work in terms of collaboration, but I think that goes back to how you see your own value. I more look at artists' work in terms of inspiring either something in what I produce, or just in terms of getting some kind of joy or emotion or satisfaction from what it is that they're produced.
Would you like to collaborate with other artists, though? Would that be something you'd be interested in doing?
Oh, totally. Yeah, I think that. Yeah, definitely.
I was saying, by artists, I don't just mean painters. I mean, musicians, poets, writers.
No, totally. I think that as a space, we're all, whilst what we produce is also different, or the mediums are also different, the reason you're doing it is all very similar, and I think that brings you together in a way that nothing else does. So yeah, absolutely, I'd definitely be up for any type of collaboration, really.
So this is why I think it's really funny when I meet artists who are like, oh, I really would love to meet other artists, but I don't know what to say. And it's like, but you're all artists. There's going to be thousands of things that you're going to have in common. You just need to find the right thing to start off with, and then you'll hear off and you'll just be good friends and you get to talk and get to share. And I think it's just I kind of wonder if social media, and we'll get actually, that's probably one more question, then we'll get into social media. It's not a segue, I guess. But I sometimes think that social media and the construction of technology has really kind of destroyed our social construct in terms of the way we talk to each other and how we feel comfortable talking to each other. Because it's just a shame that, in my opinion, people don't really have deeper conversations nowadays. In day-to-day life, like, the people I work with are lovely people, but we don't talk about interesting topics, and that's quite interesting topics. Or that could just be me being that kind of person who wants that kind of conversation, because nobody does. But it's like, I kind of almost feel like it's a shame because something like art, which has so much depth, has so much emotion, has so much meaning, like you need the time to discuss it. And sometimes even the gallery environment isn't the right environment because it's so busy and people are walking past, and you're not going to be necessarily spending 2 hours talking to one person about their work. So I think it's finding
No,
the
I
right kind of
totally
space,
agree.
finding the right space for the work, so to view the work, and the right space to discuss the work aren't even necessarily the same space.
Yeah, finding that space though.
Okay. So my next question is: do you feel like you're part of a larger art community? And then we shall get to social media after this.
Yes, I do definitely. But I think, as we've discussed so far, as a artist starting out, that community can seem huge, and it can be daunting to know how to kind of find your way into it, I think. And I think as well, as you're starting out, or probably just in your in your career, you have to prioritize certain things over others, and it is about when you make that your focus to make sure that you've got that community. And also, I'm not education, I'm not trained in this. I haven't gone to fine art school, or I don't have an education in art. So I think sometimes I wonder if actually, if I had have done that, or that was something that I looked to explore, that you would quite naturally find that community, because you, as part of your everyday, would be with people who share in the same interests as you, and are producing art in the same way. As I said, my studio's at home, so it's not like I bump into people every day who are doing what I do. So I do, and I know that the access to that community is there. And I've got a lovely friend called Jenny Murphy, who maybe you'd like to speak to. She's an artist.
I'll just speak to anybody.
Yeah, she's great, and actually, she really kindly gave me some of her time last year to just talk about my work and like maybe routes forward and to stay positive and all those other things I think we all need to hear. So the avenues are there. I think it's just about that balance between all of the different hats you have to take on, and you have to create the work, but also try and market the work, but then also try and speak to other people. And if you're doing it part-time, it is, it's tricky, but hopefully this is going to be something that I'm doing for the rest of my life. So, there's plenty of time for it. So I know it's there. It's just about trying to find the avenues in, I think.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Like, absolutely. And I think the time is there for now, but it won't always be there.
Yeah.
So let's slide on into social media, and then we have the conclusion section, and then we should end, because I feel bad. We've been here this part for 2 hours, and I can't remember how long the last bit was. So what are your thoughts on social media, and how has it impacted your practice so far?
So I think social media is both a blessing and a curse. So, I mean, I don't even have that many followers. I have, I don't know, like 1,700, 1,800 followers or something, like really not that many. Or is it more than, no, I think that's it. But even that I find incredibly stressful, trying to get like any traction, trying to get people to look at your stuff or engage or follow and all the rest of it. I think it's great because I think that it gives you access to so many artists and their work, which I think I said before, like I find it incredibly inspiring to see other people's work. But I think the downside of it is the horrible part of comparison, where you can get a bit blinded by it, I think. And it turns from being something that is quite critical to a creative process in terms of having resources that you feel further you and your journey, to something that you're looking at and feeling less than, and that you can't do something. And I think it can then really hinder what it is that you're producing. And I guess as well, like we said, there's so much emphasis these days on social media, and that you know, in order to be great, you have to have however many thousand followers. And I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm just saying this because I don't have that many followers, but does it do what you need it to do? I don't know, because I don't have that many. But at least even to get to the small group of people who I have looking at my work on Instagram, it hasn't done anything in terms of sales. Like, it hasn't done anything. You get engagement and you have people say stuff, but it isn't a very authentic channel, I don't think. I think that it's designed that you need to have someone's attention within, like, what is it, like 0.4 of a second or something? I'm sure someone correct that, but like some crazy time frame. And so how do you, as an artist, like always convey what it is that you're trying to say within a painting in that time? And also, I was talking about this with my husband. I just don't always feel like my work photographs or translates that well into social. So I find it quite difficult to draw the parallels between like what I see and the work that I put in front of me with then what I'm posting. So I don't know. I think I'm probably not fully concluded on it yet. But I do think that it is a job in itself to try and manage or grow social media. And also when you're, raising a kid and you've got a husband and you want friends and you've got family that you want to see, and you also want to produce artwork, like, I think it's quite important to create those, divides in your life and not to be on your phone all the time, but then finding the time to do it is really difficult. So I don't know, basically. It's not something that I've cracked or had, extreme success with. Maybe if I did, I'd be talking quite differently about it, but I find it really difficult and a little bit jading sometimes.
So there's about 3 different questions I want to ask you based off that. So first, friends, what are they? Because at this point, I think it's literally just people I know online at this point. But being serious for a second though, so the first thing that struck me is kind of interesting is that you said, the first thing you said was, I don't have that many followers, which is funny for 2 reasons. One, because more than I have. And secondly, it's because that is irrelevant. The amount of followers you have are irrelevant. The work you produce is what is important, because you could have 100 followers and that is your community and they'll support you no matter what you do. Or you can have 1 million followers and no one's going to look at your work. They're just passive. what I've learned so far from my own social media journey, because I used to hate social media, now I don't mind it. I'm not love it, but I don't mind it. Is it's about the impact and engagement you have of the people you have, not the people you want. Like, we all want more followers, of course, because numbers are good, quote unquote good. But at the end of the day, be grateful for the audience you currently have, because there was a time a year ago that you didn't have that audience, that you would have, and you would have wanted it a year ago, and now you have it. And my advice to anybody in life right now, which is advice I'm giving to everybody recently, which is terrible, is be grateful. And this is just in life generally. Be grateful for what you have now, because there was a time in your life that what you have now would have been the pinnacle of what you would have wanted. So be grateful for what you have now, because the future will take care of itself, and things will possibly progress. But it's always worth remembering that, you know, utilize what you have now. I've just said that about 5 times, but you know,
you're totally right. You're totally right.
Being present is so important, and not taking for granted what you have is so important. And that's every aspect of life. That's not just being an artist. That's just, you know, the job you might have, the friends you might have, the family you might have, you know, because things change. Things always change, and nothing lasts forever. You know, and at the end of the day, me being my very cynical self, is that like nothing really matters in the grand scheme of life. You're just one person in a billion. So don't put so much pressure on yourself to do everything and feel so much all the time. Maybe this is what I'm trying to get to myself, really. You know, don't put so much pressure on yourself and feel things all the time, because at the end of the day, it's all going to settle the way it settles. You know, it's just not that big of a deal at the end of the day.
No, I think you're totally right. I think that it is something that I go through periods where I am like so aware of it. I think because I'll see other artists that I love their work, and you know, their socials are doing great, and you know, like you said, followers don't really amount to, you know, they don't, at least in my experience, they don't amount to sales, or people necessarily engaging in the way that you want them to with what it is that you're producing, or feeling what you want them to feel from it. So I do think that that's worth remembering, that, and I like we were talking about earlier, it's such a strange place. Like, it's not very, there are people who are fantastic that aren't on it and do fine. So it isn't the be all and end all. And also, you know, to go back to, you know, that you said about, you know, we should be grateful for what we have. And I think that is one of the lessons and thoughts that I am really, really focusing on at the moment, in terms of, you know, I don't know if this was on when I was saying it, but, you know, I'm so lucky that as a person, a creative person, and as a person in a family, that I have got the space to do this part-time, to hopefully at some point, you know, bring something back in, but that I've been given this freedom to, you know, try it and see if it works, and invest in myself, and hope that, you know, at some point it does. And if it doesn't, then in a way, nothing's been wasted other than not making anything and spending some money. But I'm so lucky, and I know that. And talk about, you know, the society and the culture that we're in, and, you know, the themes of my work around comparison, and how the world that we live in is designed to make us see ourselves or other people in certain light. That is exactly it. Like, we're so used to comparing everything, and not very good at, I don't think we're very good at being content with what we've got.
No,
and that is something that, yeah, I think we could all do a bit more of. But yeah,
I don't know what it is. I think it's just because I'm getting older, and actually that's what it is. It's become getting older. Like, I'm seeing things very differently to how I used to. And I think the conversations I'm having with people who are a lot younger than me, you know, a lot of people I know are like, oh, I want loads of money, and I want, you know, to have, you know, a house. And it's like, yeah, that's cool. That's good to strive for that, but that's not necessarily what's going to happen to you. And I think there has to be a point in your time which you have to realize what you want and what you'll get are two different things, and they don't always match up. And that's not a bad thing, because it's not necessarily your fault, because conditions might not be right. You know, look at house prices, for instance. You know, they're crazy. Like, I would love to own a house, but can I afford it? No, I can't afford it. And I'm not going to be stupid and be like, yeah, let's just throw money into something that I can't afford. But I just think you're right. I think, yeah, people just aren't content. And I think it's good to be motivated to strive to want to do better for yourself. There's nothing wrong with it. I think it's a great idea. But I also think you have to really respect the situation you have in life, because things always, people have it. I don't know why I'm remembering about this, because you probably don't care, but like, people always have it worse off than you do. As much as you like to always think, you know, things aren't perfect, or, oh, I wish I made more money, or, oh, I wish I had, you know, a nicer car or a nicer house or whatever. Like, people have nothing, and they're happy.
Oh, totally.
So,
and
yeah, that was a really random ramble.
No. It's actually a really interesting point, because part of like my creative process, and there are kind of two things in that. The first is, part of my creative process and why I kind of got to this place is, so my son was born through IVF, and I don't know if this is like a massive overshare, but he was born through IVF, and I then struggling with secondary infertility. So part of why I'm doing what I do, and why like the focus of women in those themes is so important, is because that all links to like my own personal journey in terms of that space. And you know, talk about like comparing and being grateful for what you've got. Like, I would love another child, but equally my son was born premature. For a long time I didn't know he was even going to survive. I didn't even know I was going to have him. Like, there's so many things that, you know, sometimes you have to step back and take note of it. And I think the other thing as well is like how all of those things link into a creative process. You know, for me, in terms of the work and being older and having a slightly different perspective on things, is a huge influence on what it is that I now produce, that I definitely wouldn't have before. You know, if I think about when I was younger, I would have never considered myself a feminist. Yes, I wanted equal rights for men and women, but I kind of thought that was a given. And I suppose then, like, those themes in my work have only come out because of the journey I've been on, and whether that be, you know, work, you know, how work is very structured and how it tends to lean towards favouring men, and pay gaps and all those other things. There's also been a huge, I would say, like, awakening for women over the past year, probably triggered a lot by the death of Sarah Everard, where, you know, I think it was a bit of a light bulb moment for a lot of us, where it's like, whoa, like, we all just accept that this is fine, but it's really not fine, that we walk home and are terrified. And it's really funny that, like, you're brought up with these things, you know, whether that be something as a woman that you're brought up with, or as a man that you're brought up with these themes or these ideas, and then when you kind of step back or get older and look back and think, God, that's crazy that we feel like that's all okay, that the way that we live our lives and the constructs that are set for us are okay, and it's really not okay. So yeah, I totally get that, looking back and being a bit older and what that does in terms of our opinions on things and what we want to produce.
Yeah, so I love talking to artists who are older because they're wiser and they have more to say. They've got more life experience and they're coming from a very different place to some people who I speak to who are younger, who are maybe a little bit more kind of, oh, I want popularity, I want fame. Because a lot of the older artists are doing it for very different intentions. Like people's intentions are so different. And I like kind of getting engaged on that. I think it's very interesting to know both sides. So you said something earlier that you wanted to talk about, and the idea of kind of the illusion of success and the idea of, social media allows you to draw comparisons. Just talk a little bit more about that, actually, because that's a really good consideration.
Yeah, I think it probably is similar to some of the points we've made just around social media. Definitely, I think there are a few ways that you look at someone's social media to see whether or not you think that they've been successful or not. And I guess largely it is on the number of followers that they've got. And they've got however many thousand followers. Basically, the more followers you've got, the more successful you are. The more sales you're going to make, the better your artwork is, the more established or esteemed you are. And in reality, I don't know that necessarily the more successful, quote unquote, you look on social media is actually relative to what you consider your own success to be. And I think we all have our own definition of what success might be, whether that be that you, I don't know, sell however many paintings in a year, or that you make however much money, or that you're seen by these people, or you exhibit in this place, or that you have however many thousand followers by the end of the year. I think social media can make it feel like that is the only mark of success, and that success doesn't necessarily equate to the success of at least how I feel being an artist is, and what I would get my fulfillment from, I suppose.
This is a question for the next section, but actually now it's very relevant. But how do you define what it means to be a successful artist?
The term success is a really difficult one to answer, and I don't think that I'm necessarily at the place that I feel like I am successful. So I'm not sure what that necessarily means to me yet. And also I think that how we value or define success changes, because I think that we all create these milestones for ourselves. And, as you were saying before, oh, if you got to this stage, that would be amazing and that's all you want. But then you reach that stage and then you shift it. So I think that line continues to move, I suppose, just as times change and things change. I think it's ever evolving, really. But if I think right now about what success would mean to me, I think it would be having some kind of reputation in whatever space that is, whether that be amongst other artists, that other artists know who I am. I think that that's a great thing. And, we spoke a lot about community, and I think that allows for that and allows you to, for opportunities maybe to open up. I also think, obviously, if you can start to establish yourself or support yourself financially, then there's an element of success in that people are willing to pay for your work and have it hanging on their wall. But also I think it's such a difficult one to say that, because as we know, a lot of the most, famous artists that we now talk about are people who perhaps when they were here would not have defined themselves as successful artists. So I don't know. I think it's a really strange question in an artistic space to know what that success looks like. And I think that probably it'll just continue to change as time evolves and my practice changes, and I don't know, where I am in my life and my journey continues to move, really.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think you're a great person to ask, because you're at that point where you're not looking for quote unquote financial success right now. And it's quite nice to kind of see, as an artist who's more emerging than anything else, it's like your idea of success now is going to be very different. So I think you are actually a very good person to ask. And not just that, I'm always really curious, is like, you have to remember the phase in which you're in terms of your art, in terms of starting out now, is a really beautiful phase to be in. It means you can make as many mistakes as you want, and you can try out things as much as you want, and there's no pressure, there's no expectation,
there's no
demand that you have to do things in a certain way. So kind of embrace that. That's my random advice to an artist for today.
No,
one of many is just embrace that. Embrace that, because there will be a time in your career where you won't be able to do the things you do now, because you'll be expected to do certain things, or expected to create a certain way. And I guess that's one thing I wanted to ask as well, as the social media category is does knowing your work will be read online change the way you create it?
I don't think that it does in terms of the actual production of a piece, but I think then when I see my work online, it looks different to me than how I see it. I said to you before that I don't think my work translates very well, and that probably is also just down to the fact that I don't photograph my work very well, or I haven't found the right space to do that in. But so I definitely don't, when I'm making something, it is in no way actually part of the process for me thinking of creating something that is social media friendly or pleasing. That kind of is more of a secondary thing that I then think of, I need to photograph this, and how is it going to translate onto this platform, and not always that well.
Yeah, that's cool. And I think that's very interesting that you're aware that your work looks different online and in person. Like you're very aware of the fact that you've seen it both ends, and you actually are conscious of that, because I think we all know that that's the case, but I don't know how conscious artists are of actually that. And not just that, the caption and the way you explain yourself online with your work is going to be different to somebody having no kind of visual visual cues about the work itself, going into a gallery, just seeing it on a wall.
I think though that as an artist, for me personally, there's so much about the look and feel and texture of a piece. Like you'll see in a lot of my work, there's a lot of very thick paint and stuff like that, and I really like that. I like the differences between having something that looks very flat or I suppose, more two-dimensional, and then bringing in those elements of having something quite thick and textured, and different brushstrokes and all that kind of elements that I do think do get lost when you take pictures of them. I think that there's so much of what is enjoyable about art is the visceral experience of seeing a piece and touching a piece and just being there with it, as opposed to seeing something just 2D. And I think that is also part of the reason why when I created, I didn't feel the fulfillment from creating digital art as I maybe hoped that I would, because you don't have that. There's nothing. You're not dirty. You're not getting your hands dirty in any way. I mean, if you saw my studio, it is so messy. I'm not a clean painter, and I very much admire artists that can paint and not create a mess and organise. It is a bombshell in there, but I think there's something about that maybe that also comes through in my work that I just don't think I can capture without someone maybe seeing it.
Fair enough. I think for them that's like the environment in which you're putting yourself into, because that's the environment that's going to create the work itself. Your work in some way can be seen as quite chaotic and quite busy. So it's nice that reflects the environment you're working in. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. That's your own personal space which you create stuff. It can be however clean or however messy you want it to be, because it's yours. If that's the environment you work best in, that's the environment you work best in. So I have a couple of questions from a couple of different people for you. Because again, I like to reference people I've spoken to, and or people I haven't spoken to yet that I will eventually speak to. But you can imagine, as much as I do these interviews, I speak to a lot of people who I never interview, but I speak to them via voice message or via video message, as you can imagine, on Instagram. So I keep up with a lot of people on a day-to-day basis. I don't know how the hell I do it, but I do it. So yes, so the first question I have is from, again, the artist I referenced earlier, Runa Othello, absolutely amazing person. And her question, so full disclosure, I've asked everybody if I can use their questions, because that's the nice thing to do. And why is it? It's actually not a question for you specifically. It's a question they put on their stories, I think, that I've seen, and I'm like, oh, I like this. So I messaged them saying, oh, can I use this and credit you? Can I use it on an interview, or like all my interviews? And they all say yes. Well, mostly say yes. So it's not for you specifically, not yet. There is a question that's specifically for you, but this is a question that people just ask, and I'm like, oh, I want to approach that. So the question is, do you like it when somebody comments that your work is similar to another artist?
Yeah. I definitely don't dislike it. I think that it's probably quite natural that there'll be parallels between, different artists' work, because we're all, we're in this world together, and I'm sure that, in some way we're influenced by what we see and the other works that we see. So I'm definitely not. I would say that it's quite nice sometimes to feel like there's a common ground between how you see something and how someone else sees it.
That's a very good answer. Second question is from the very, very awesome, who is one of the coolest people I've met, Brian Dean House. It's going to be a note to mention his name, because I mention his name in almost every interview. And if he knows I'm going to mention his name in every interview. So his question is, which is more important, the skill of the artist or the personality of the artist?
Ooh. I have got to say the personality of the artist, because I think, again, this idea of skill is, I guess we can all say if someone is skilled or not, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're, it's almost redundant, I think, in a way. I think that art is so personal to you. I might see something and absolutely love it, and you could say, oh, I just, I can't understand it, I don't like it. So, and in a way, that's nothing to do with skill. That's just how you interpret it and what emotions of that artist are coming out in the piece. So I would say personality.
Cool. That was an interesting topic discussion we had. So yeah, that's cool. So the third question I have from somebody else is from a very good friend of mine now, Emma Hutchins, incredible photographer. He's just one of the most loveliest people I know.
Yes,
I know a lot of other people, but he's one of the top people. And his question is, does money devalue talent?
I think to a degree, yes. I think that money creates a value for something, or is a construct for a value of something that maybe doesn't really exist. I mean, if you think about anything and the value, that the financial value of something, you could see something or you could have like an heirloom or something that is completely worthless in terms of a financial, in terms of finances, but be worth more to you than anything. So I think that it does. And I think also as an artist, that can sometimes cloud your vision or your approach to something if you start thinking about things too much in a financial sense. But equally, it's difficult because most of us are aiming at some point to be financially rewarded for the work we produce. So it's a bit of a catch-22, I suppose. I don't really, Yeah,
and all of those questions don't have right or wrong answers, which is the best thing. Like, they're just really interesting
totally.
points. So I'm like, that's why I saw them. I was like,
no, they're really good.
I should just literally just stop making any questions myself and just give me questions, because at this point, what am I doing at this point? So what I do with every interview is I always ask the last artist the question for the next artist. So the last person I interviewed was again another really, really, really insanely good photographer that I'm actually surprised I even managed to talk to, called Caffeine Cowboy. And his question for you, without knowing it's for you, I don't tell people who it's for necessarily, is what, if anything, do you want to see change in your art?
I'm really looking forward to seeing how things develop over the next few months. So I finished up a series of 100 portraits earlier this year, and the purpose of that was to try and just take myself away from the pressures that I kind of created for myself in terms of the art that I produce, and to naturally, hopefully, create a bit of a series or a style of a series that I was enjoying and that I wanted to follow through, which definitely, if I now look back through and can see where I am now, that did do for me. And I think now I kind of want to see those ideas and the deeper meaning kind of translate into something a bit bigger. So I'm looking forward to creating some slightly bigger pieces for a start. And I think that's probably the main thing. I also really want to change just focusing on portraiture in terms of a face. I kind of want to start creating more full pieces of bodies and things like that, and see what comes of that. And to see what changes as well as I meet new artists, hopefully over the next year, and have those conversations and have kind of light bulb moments, which seem to happen when you have conversations with people around ideas that I want to try out, I think.
So do you have a question for the next person?
Yeah, so I was really intrigued to know, this is a very basic question actually, but it's more about the process. So my question was, when is your favorite time of the day to create work and why? Because I have a certain time, I love painting in the mornings, and I think it's just like, if the light is just right, it's so nice, and also you're very fresh and creatively very open. But I know a lot of artists actually who love painting at night. So I kind of want to know more around what the artists, why that is their favorite time, and I guess like what, in terms of their headspace, where they are at that point as well.
That's a really good question, man.
Very different to the other ones you've had, but yeah,
that's good. That's perfect. Okay, so my next question for you is a double barrel question. So bear with me. So the first part is, in your opinion, what makes a good piece of art? And the second part of that is, what was the last image or piece of media that captivated you, and what was it about it that left an impression on you?
So I think that a good piece of art is anything that kind of stops you and makes you consider something, whether that be that you're looking, or that makes you relate to something in yourself. So you might try and interpret it through your own eyes and your own experiences, or see how it fits into your own world. I think it takes you out of the everyday and what you're doing, and you're looking for the meaning within it, I think. And there's an artist called Ferguson, who I saw recently, and his work was, it was really interesting. It was probably actually something like you were saying to me, his art isn't realistic, and it's not abstract. It is, again, somewhere in that common ground. So I really, really loved what he produced. And there was also, I'm now going to look it up because it was so wonderful, an artist called Prudence Flint, and I saw her series, The Call, at just advertised in a gallery, and it was so thought-provoking for me, and just very like the aesthetics of it. I think it was the colours, and the subjects of hers were all women as well, kind of sat or stood or laying in different positions. Have you seen her work?
I was sent her work 2 days ago by a good friend of mine called Nate Burbeck, who is an incredible artist and also a really great curator. He actually sent me her work about 2 days ago. So she's on my very, very long list of people to interview and slash invite for a feature.
Yeah.
So yes, that's why I searched her, because I was like, wait, her name sounds really familiar. Yeah, I do know her work actually. Her work is really, really interesting. I love the proportions.
Yes, and actually, I realised, so I'd seen her work, and I was like totally blown away by it, and really, really loved her proportions of it. And I then took some of that into some of the self-portraits I was saying that I've been doing.
That's cool.
There's just something there's a softness to her work that I think is very, very intriguing. But equally, that there's something underneath it. I mean, even the fact that the women are in the positions that they're in, I think it's a really fascinating set.
I like the colour palette of her work as well. I think the colours are like, I like is very cohesive. Like even if the image is like very different, the colours are so cohesive, and that's a really great, that's a good example of a great visual style, because it's like she can create images of like lions, but it'll be her work. The colours will be similar and the style will be similar. It's like actually a very good way to create work that's not repetitive and not boring. It'd be so consistent. Like that's a really
definitely.
So my next question for you then is, what would your younger self think about your work?
I think my younger self would wonder what was going on in like my life at that point that I made it. But equally, I think that, even if I think back to the work that I made when I was younger, I pretty much always focused on women even then. So that it probably wouldn't be that much of a surprise to see some of the pieces that I'm making. I don't think I'm probably not that far away from that. But I think that there would be a curiosity to know more about what was going on.
That's so cool, and that's really interesting. If you're creating stuff that's very similar to what you used to create, because it's kind of like natural.
Yeah, maybe.
And that's fascinating. It's fascinating that you've used your experience and your wisdom to translate into the way you create now. And I think that's what is very powerful in a lot of art. I think we take that for granted, that it's our life experiences we're working through in the work. Cause I often have found that I definitely enjoy artists who are older. I enjoy their work a lot more because they have, for me at least, they have more to say. Or at least there's more things considered in their work, or there's more layers to it, I think.
Yeah, no,
for
totally.
me at least.
I would agree.
That's just my opinion. I'm not saying someone who is like 15, 16, 17 can't create incredibly great work. They can. It's just I don't know if they'd have the depth to be able to kind of understand it necessarily in the same way. Because once when you're 17, you know anything. So should art be comfortable? Because I think you said your work was unsettling, which is a great way to describe it. But there's also a bit of discomfort in your work, and also the subject matter itself in terms of the conversations you want to create. So should art be comfortable?
I don't think it should be comfortable or uncomfortable. I think that it should be whatever you feel like you need to do as the artist, or as the person buying it. I know a lot of people don't necessarily want uncomfortable art in their home. They want aesthetically, pieces that are calming and create that nice environment. And that probably isn't what I'm making. But I think that I don't think it should be one or the other. I think that it should just be part of the process that you go on, and you end up where you do. And I don't think, although I could be wrong, that you necessarily produce anything to be comfortable or uncomfortable. I think that you might have a feeling or an emotion that you're playing with when you make something, but I don't, and maybe that's just my opinion, that when I'm making something, I don't think I want it to be uncomfortable. But you might want to create something that makes someone have to stop in their tracks almost to consider it. But I don't think that should be a limiting thing. You can, I think, play with it however you want it to be, create the emotions that you want, or be able to convey in whatever way that you need to the feelings or the subject that it is that you're trying to get out there.
That's a very good piece of advice. I think that's very telling though of the way you create your work and the mindset you have in creating your work, because it's nice to see that you're not just like, okay, cool, feminism is a popular subject, let's just jump on board that train and create work that's going to sell, because people are doing that. Let's be very honest. There are a few artists that I know of that, when Black Lives Matter was at the forefront, their work kind of shifted, the narrative of their work shifted a lot, and now it shifted back, because selling prints and making money during the pandemic, wasn't easy for a lot of people. So I think it's very nice that you're very true to what you actually believe in and what you're interested in, and then the work itself is going to be a manifestation of that. I think that's very.
I think though that's probably the only way to do it if you want longevity with what it is that you're doing. You can fake it to a degree, but I think that comes out at some point. And as we said before, the different pieces that you produce and the different themes and series, they'll adapt as time goes on and as you experience different things. But you'll see that progression. It won't just be a start-stop. I don't think, at least. Yeah.
So I have two more questions for you. That is it, I'm afraid. So how would you like to develop your practice in the coming year? And actually, this is a broad question. And do you have any goals you'd like to achieve in 2022?
So I'm hoping at some point this year I'll be able to commit more time to producing work. That will be great. I think that will kind of give me a bit more freedom and a bit more space to see where things go and not necessarily have those restraints in quite as much of the way that I do at the moment. I think that I also want to spend more time developing, like we were talking about the colour palette, like really honing in on that colour palette. And again, that could just be for a series. I think that anything that I make, is nothing set in stone. I think things just continue to shift and move and change. But for this year, at least, that's something that I'd like to see. And I think, I do definitely have goals for this year. Like I said, I'm doing a lot of applications for different exhibits and galleries and things. And I'm really hoping that something comes out of that, just to get work showcased and be in an environment where I get to speak to some artists and curators. And just, I think, be a bit more confident with what it is that I'm doing and feeling okay to say, I'm an artist, and that not feel like something that like gets stuck in my throat and I'm instantly questioning myself if I should be saying that or not at the time that I say it. I think owning it a bit more and having that, trying to find that self-worth in it that we've spoken about, I think is going to be a massive thing for this year, and I hope is going to hopefully lead to elements of success in whatever that looks like, whether that just be feeling more assured in my work and what I'm doing, or having some people want to purchase some pieces. I'm certainly not creating financial goals for myself. That's not something that I'm setting out this year. It's just more about like, not yet, no, but I just would like to get my stuff out there, I think, in a few more avenues and get to speak to some more people and hopefully, just get a bit more traction, I think. Totally.
Which is what I think everyone needs to do. That we forget that it's not just financial. The money doesn't just come straight away. You have a reputation. You have to build that. You have to be. It has to be an authentic reputation as well. It can't be like okay, I'll just forge this because it seems like I'll get a lot of money. Because as you said, it might work short term. It's not going to work long term. But I think that you have a great mentality. And I'm very much looking forward to seeing your career take off. I truly am. Like the one benefit I get of doing what I do, one of many benefits is I get to watch people grow, and I do not take it for granted. I enjoy it so much. It's the best thing. It truly is. There's so many cool artists I've seen that I'm like, I know they're going to do good things. So
thank you so much. I mean, I'm hoping that, like you said, that reputation will kind of start to grow a bit and that I get seen a bit more, and hopefully like doing things like this and getting this conversation with you is just one of those fantastic opportunities to do that. So massively appreciate your time and reaching out to me. Does mean a lot, so thank you.
Honestly, it's no problem. It's no problem. So the last question, which is a double barrel question, is what are you currently working on and where can people find more about you and your work?
So I am currently doing a series of self-portraits, and that's leading into another collection of images I'm going to be making that are more around the theme the theme of self-reflection. So I'm going to be looking at that a bit more. And the easiest way to find my work is at my website, which is ellisking.co.uk, or on Instagram, and I am Ellis King Art. That's my Instagram account handle.
That's perfect. Honestly, Ellis,
thank you. I've had a great time. I really appreciate it.
That concludes the second and final part of my conversation with Ellis King. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions or comments about the episode, please email me at theflyingfruitbowl@gmail.com or get in touch via social media sites such as Twitter and Instagram. The Flying Fruit Bowl podcast can now be found on a variety of sites such as Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Music. If you like the show, please consider rating, reviewing, sharing, or subscribing on any of these platforms to help spread the show. Also, don't forget to check out theflyingfruitbowl.co.uk, where we post daily art inspiration and written interviews. And if you're a creative, please get in touch for a chance to be featured or interviewed. If you'd like to support the platform further, we now also have a Patreon page. Tiers start from £1, and for more information, head on over to patreon.com/theflyingfruitbowl. If you prefer to make a one-time donation to the Fine Fruit Bowl, we also now have a PayPal. The link to the PayPal should be included in the show notes. Once again, thank you very much for listening to the episode today.